Hello, Modern here. Today with a highly optimized and probably the best pulverized build you will ever see in this game, at least until season 1. I optimized the Paragon Boards, I optimized the Skilltree, I optimized the gameplay to be as smooth as possible without the Umbral Ring and any unique items. This means this build only needs the aspects to be truly functional. It is fast paced, has insane burst, is very versatile and extremely tanky due to high amounts of armor and DR, has incredible uptime on disobedience, and feels just really smooth to play, which is surprising because it's a pulverized build. Not a single target of pulverize is usually very bad. However, this build fixes this. We have top tier uptime on vulnerable, we have top tier uptime on our spirit, even in single target situations, and the AoE is still extremely good. This means this build can speed farm lower tier dungeons, however not as good as the shred builds. You can safely push high nightmare dungeons, with 60 to 70 being a breeze and 70 plus starting to hurt you somewhat, but you're still relatively safe, and you can even do Uber Lilith. However, this build is not OP, so it's still a very tough fight and you need to learn the mechanics to really progress here. Now, as far as the playstyle goes, we are going to utilize Stormstrike as our base skill. This base skill has a spirit generation of 14, so not enough to sustain our pulverize needs, which needs 35. However, that's very easily fixed. First, we are going to go into the Paragon Board and pick up Inner Beast, which gives us 30% spirit cost reduction. With the combination of Clarity, which can be found in the companion cluster, we are getting 6 spirit whenever we transform back into a human. Because we are going to alternate between those two, we are always going to alternate between a werewolf form and a human form, which gives us 20 spirit. Now, when we combine this one further with intelligence, which is resource generation, we're going to get around 24-23 spirit. Now with this spirit, we are going to sustain our pulverize needs very comfortably. We can then further gain, for example, a spirit cost reduction modifier on our boots, which gives us 100% sustain. Currently, we need to weave in another Stormstrike whenever we are on low spirit. And this makes it incredibly comfortable to play. We run into enemy lines, we smack them one time, we pulverize. We smack them one time, we pulverize. And we do this all the time. And as you can see, our spirit is never depleting. And we can repeat this one basically for every pack. Because we run to packs, pulverize, run to the next one. And the damage is really, really solid. And in tougher packs, we are going to root them, we are going to petrify them, and then we are going to nuke them for millions and millions of damage. Like sometimes the shockwave is not going to hit, which is really not that good, but most of the time you're very consistent with the damage. Now, a lot of things happened during this fight, so I will break this one down. We use our Poison Creeper to apply poison, which gives us additional damage through Envenom. We then use Petrify to root them and stun them into place, which gives us another 30% more multiplier to our crit strike damage. We are then going to use Hurricane and the Poison Creeper dot to stack up our disobedience, which makes us incredibly tanky because we're getting 100 stacks very, very fast. And we are going to weave in our Stormstrike and Pulverize in between to damage our enemies. Sometimes enemies are standing in a very, very bad position, above chests for example, and it makes it incredibly hard to hit our targets with Pulverize because of the Pulverize behavior. So you need to kite enemies back to a favorable position and then use a Pulverize. Otherwise you're not going to hit them. This is basically the whole build. Whenever we are stuck, we are going to Trample. Trample can also be used to knock back enemies into walls to stun them, which is a nice get out of jail free card. Otherwise you don't want to press Trample for mobility. It's strictly for unstoppable and getting out of sticky situations. Next I will go over the aspects. For the helmet we are going to use the Might aspect. Since we are constantly Stormstriking, we are going to apply the Might damage reduction as well as the Stormstrike damage reduction, which results in 20 and 25%. For the chest we are going to use an Insatiable Fury. If you have it, this one is for lower tier dungeons. When you want to push higher, you want the additional damage reduction you get instead of the physical damage and overpower damage. The ranks to wearable skills are currently at 3, because whenever you upgrade this one to 5, it increases to 3 for some reason. We can show you this. We have currently 12, we take this one off and we are now at 9, but we should only get 2. The more ranks you have, the less valuable this chest becomes. So if you push high nightmare dungeons, you want a chest with as much DR and the protector aspect. The protector aspect gives you a shield a barrier that's up every time you engage elite enemies, with a 20-second cooldown in between packs. But you're not always going to fight elite enemies, so it's basically up all the time for the elite packs. Gives you a ton of additional survivability. For the gloves, go for the retaliation one. Retaliation gives you a more damage multiplier for your core skills, up to 40% whenever you are fortified at a 100% value. Because of how this build functions, you're always going to be at fortify 100. For the pants, go for disobedience. Disobedience gives you 50% more armor. The more armor multiplier is applied after every instance of total armor on your gear, be it werebear form or regular total armor. So you get to around 9k armor with this one at this current stage, and then it's multiplied by the additional 50% from disobedience. So you are basically immortal at lower tier dungeons, up to around 63, 65, where you start to feel something. For the boots, go for the ballistic aspect. Ballistic gives you 2 ranks to earth skills while you're fortified. I personally prefer the additional damage instead of the additional movement speed because it doesn't really matter all that much. The additional movement speed you get through the other aspects, like the Wind Striker one, because Wind Striker gives you movement speed on crit, and the Unstoppable one is not going to be all that great because we are not constantly unstoppable, and the crit one is okay, but 16 movement speed is less value than 2 ranks to earth skills. For the weapon, go for the Pulverize aspect, the Shockwave aspect. This one is relatively hard to get, but I found a few already. For this one, I gambled specifically maces on the Obel vendor. So when you look at the map, you have one here, for example, the Purveyor of Curiosities, and this one needs to be gambled for the maces. This one has the highest chance to roll for the Shockwave aspect. Another way to farm this one efficiently is to do every Helltide. This basically doubles up to triples your damage. But the build is completely playable without this aspect. You just deal a lot less damage. For the amulet, go for the natural balance one. This one gives you up to 70% more multiplier on critical strike damage whenever we use a storm skill. So our storm skill is Storm Strike, and then 4 seconds afterwards we are going to deal 70% more crit damage. For the first ring, we are going to use Urzin Horror. This one changes your Pulverize to an earth skill, and then you are going to benefit through natural balance and other crit damage modifiers or modifiers to earth skill damage or nature skill damage. The additional damage of this one is basically negligible, especially in higher difficulties, but it helps clean up, like for example bees or mosquitoes that are flying around you. This one is considered mandatory for this build for the scaling purposes. And for the last one, Accelerating Loop, we are not going for another more multiplier because we don't really need to. We deal a ton of damage already, but the additional 25% attack speed after critically striking with a core skill is going to help you immensely, especially since you are playing with a two-handed axe. So any attack speed modifier you can get is going to make this build feel much smoother. So I feel like this one is mandatory for this build to feel great. Next, let's go over the Spirit Boons. For the Spirit Boons, we are going to go with Wariness for the deer, but we can also go for Advantageous Beast, which reduces the crowd control impairing effect duration by 15%. This one is kind of okay since we are already stacking a little bit of that with the Restrained passive. So when combined with this one, it should work additively, so you're getting around 40% less crowd control duration. For the next cluster, we are going to go with 5% crit strike chance, as well as whooping attacks. However, instead of the crit strike chance, you can also go with Iron Feathers. Iron Feathers is a more multiplier to a life, so currently we are at 10.8k. When we take this one off and take this one, we are getting 1.1k, which is 10% of the previous number. This one is pretty damn good, and the higher you go, the more mandatory this one becomes. So you drop the Sky Talents and go with Iron Feathers instead. For the next one, we are going to go with Pack Leader. Pack Leader gives us a lucky chance to reset the cooldown of one of our companion abilities for 20%. That's basically only our Poison Creeper. So when we pulverize and critically strike a pack, we are most likely going to reset our Poison Creeper for the next pack. This gives us a massive damage multiplier because we are going to use the Envenom passive. We can find this one here, which gives us 60% more damage versus poisoned enemies. And in the last cluster, we're going to go with Masochistic. Masochistic gives us a 3% maximum life heal on critical strikes with shapeshifting skills. And would you look at that, Pulverize is a shapeshifting skill. Next, I'm going to go over the stats on gear. First, a disclaimer. This build, at level 100, if you have the full Paragon Board, does not need any stats on your gear. Meaning the intelligence on this Headpiece is basically absolutely useless, because the only ability we truly care about at the end, and that's going to be one of the last boards we pick, is going to be this cluster, Earthen Power, which needs 430 intelligence. We have 62 intelligence on our helmet. When we subtract this one from the 492, we are going to go down to 430, which is the exact number we need. So we don't need any intelligence or dexterity or willpower on our gear to get the full benefit of the Paragon Board at level 100. There have been small optimizations made, like for example going with this intelligence node instead of this dexterity node, that really make this one happen. So as for the other stats, go for Life on Kill. Life on Kill gives you a ton of sustain additionally to the masochistic node. You're going to want cooldown reduction and total armor on this one. And instead of the intelligence, we want maximum life, especially at level 100. At lower levels, the intelligence is fine because you don't have the full Paragon Board yet. For the chest, if you're not using Insatiable Fury, go for as much DR as possible. You can roll total armor while in wearable form, so that's also very important. And that's about it. For the gloves, go for Crit Strike Shards, ranks to Pulverize, Storm Skill cooldown to lower the cooldown of our Hurricane, because otherwise the cooldown is going to be astronomical and you want to have as much uptime as possible in higher Nightmare difficulties on this one. And attack speed. There is no room on this one for crit strike damage with earth skills, which would translate to around 2% more damage in total on a critical strike. But I feel like the increased cooldown reduction on our Hurricane is going to be much better than the additional damage. For the pants, go for as much DR as possible and total armor. For the boots, go for damage reduction while injured. You can also go for damage reduction while injured on your pants. Movement speed, dodge chance. Dodge chance versus distance is also great. And for the last one, spirit cost reduction is best. This one has total armor while in werewolf form because it's a leftover boot. I recycled this one from my shred build and I don't want to roll over this one because it's a near perfect set of boots. However, it's completely useless on this build. So go for something else I already mentioned, like spirit cost reduction. For the amulet, ranks to envenom, very important. Then movement speed, flat. Movement speed after killing an elite. And another set of damage reduction. Damage reduction while fortified is great, but damage reduction while injured is best. You can pick up damage reduction while injured on the amulet, on the boots, and the pants. So basically you can get to around 82% total damage reduction while injured when you have a massive health pool. That's basically quadrupling your health pool at the lower health pool. For your rings, go for Crit Strike Chance, Crit Strike Damage, Vulnerable Damage, and Crit Strike Damage with Earth Skills. Instead of Crit Strike Damage with Earth Skills, you can also go with Life, which is the preferable stat when you want to push high Nightmare dungeons, because you want as much health as possible. The comfortable range for 65 plus is going to be around 15k, 70k is the target you want to reach. And when you want to push like 90 plus, you want 20k plus. And for the weapon, go for as much vulnerable damage as possible, core skill damage, crit strike damage, and crit strike damage with earth skills. However, instead of the core skill damage, you can also go with willpower. I personally prefer the core skill damage because we are not going to stack as many increases to our damage, so that bucket is not as full as with other builds. So the core skill damage here is probably preferred. As for the weapon base, the axe, the two-handed axe, is going to give us damage to healthy enemies because we deal a massive hit right at the start of the fight. We want this exact axe. Next, I will go over the skill tree. We are going to start with Storm Strike, as well as Enhanced Storm Strike and Fierce Storm Strike. Fierce Storm Strike is going to give us 100% uptime basically on any boss or elite enemy for vulnerable, which boosts our damage immensely. We then max out Pulverize as well as Primal Pulverize, which gives us a 20% damage reduction whenever we pulverize enemies. This also triggers on the shockwave, so that's a basically 20% less damage taken. We don't want Heart of the Wild and Wild Impulses because we don't want to increase the spirit cost of our Pulverize to have a smoother playstyle. Instead, we are going to pick Predatory Instinct for 6% additional crit strike chance, as well as Iron Fur for 9% damage reduction. As for the next cluster, we don't pick anything here. Debilitating Roar is an option, however I don't like it because of the high cooldown and less uptime than, for example, Hurricane. In the companion cluster, we pick a Poison Creeper with Brutal Poison Creeper for 20% crit strike chance. The Ferocious Poison Creeper gives us more uptime on the poison, but we are nuking enemies. They will never live 6 seconds, so having that additional crit strike chance is much better. And Clarity. Clarity is mandatory for this build, so pick this one early, especially when you're leveling this build, because otherwise you're going to suffer with spirit cost. In the next cluster, we're going to pick quite a lot. First, we start with Trample to get access to an Unstoppable buff. We don't pick any of the enhancements because they're trash. For Hurricane, we pick up 1 point here. Enhanced Hurricane for Slow. Slow is giving us a CC, which lets us deal more damage. And Savage Hurricane, which is basically a 20% less damage taken. This one stacks with the Pulverize. So this one, the 20% on here. As for the passives, we pick 1 in Neurotoxin and 3 points in Venom. We have 3 additional points for the Amulet. Then we max out this cluster completely. Safeguard, 3 points here. Crushing Earth, 3 points here. And Stoneguard, 3 points here. 2 of those are giving us a more multiplier and 1 gives us Fortify and Critical Strikes. As you can see, this one is base life, not maximum life. So we prefer the 3 points in here whenever you are at higher levels and have more health. Otherwise, you're not going to reach 100% Fortify ever. So 3 points here are mandatory. In the next cluster, we pick Petrify, just 1 skill point here because the increased duration is not going to give us anything and the increased spirit generation is also not going to benefit us all that much. So only the Petrify here for the CC as well as the crit damage increase to bosses as well as elite enemies and regular enemies out in the field. It's especially great versus cold enchanted enemies. Then we max out Defiance, Natural Disaster as well as Resonance. Resonance is basically proccing every single Pulverize because we are weaving in Storm Strike every single time. And then we pick Shapeshifting. Shapeshifting is also going to proc the 15% increased damage on basically every Pulverize because we are shapeshifting from a Storm Strike human form to a Werber form. And then we pick up Restraint. Restraint is going to give us 27% reduced duration of control impairing effects. This can stack with the aforementioned Spirit Boon, so that's really good, especially since we are not going to have 100% uptime on our Unstoppable. And for the Keystone, we have 2 options. I personally prefer also in Strength because 20% more maximum life permanently is really good and 30% more damage while health is also really solid. We can however also go with Earth Might for a guaranteed 100% crit strike chance, but it's extremely inconsistent and I prefer the Ursin Strength. And another option is Beast to Rampage if you want to have that 30% more damage multiplier all the time and not while only on healthy. And next, the Paragon Board. Now this Paragon Board is optimized to the absolute maximum. There is only one single node that is not unlocked through just basically the Paragon Board, and that's Crushing Earth, which is 10% increased Earth skill damage. Everything else should be unlocked. So every armor node, every life node, every damage node, every single resistance node. Well, this one is useless, but basically every single important node is getting unlocked and you're going to get the benefit from the rare nodes, which is immense for this build. For the starter board, we're going to go with Exploit. Exploit is giving us vulnerable damage, which is basically really nice on this build. And this board has the most optimal pathing for the dexterity nodes. You're basically not wasting anything here, despite it not being the maximum you can get. However, you save so many points, it's just worth picking up Exploit in this specific spot. Next board, we're going to look at Constricting Tendrils. We pick up Spirit in the Glyph slot, we pick up Nature's Will, we pick up Courage for the access to the Dexterity nodes, and we get a bunch of Dexterity nodes here. Those are very nicely laid out, so you're basically getting those for free. The next board is going to be the Inner Beast. Inner Beast gives us a 30% Spirit cost reduction, which is basically permanent on this build. For this one, we path through here and grab this one immediately. Afterwards, we have multiple choices. But the best one is to immediately go for this glyph cluster, pick up this glyph for the increase to fortify damage, a ton of armor on all those nodes, the attack speed right here, and then you path through here to the Urban Devastation board. Path through here, beeline this node. Gives you a more damage multiplier. You can pick up everything else afterwards. And you want to unlock this board because those nodes have otherwise a very high, nasty requirement for the dexterity and the intelligence, which you will probably not be able to get. Next, we want to path to this board and unlock the Survival Instinct node. This one gives you another more multiplier. We want to unlock this glyph slot immediately. This glyph slot gives us access to Shapeshifting has a 20% chance to cause the skill's damage to critically strike. This is immense. This is a massive boost to our damage. So level this glyph as fast as possible because you need level 15 on the glyph to unlock the last dexterity node here to benefit from this one. Next, we're going to path to here and unlock the Ancestral Guidance node. This will help with our spirit generation and will give us a 30% more multiplier. Afterwards, we're going to flesh out the whole board. So pick up nodes like, for example, Shapeshifter, pick up nodes like Crushing Earth, pick up nodes like Oppress, pick up nodes like Earthen Power, Devastation here. All of those nodes are not mandatory for the build and will boost your damage at the highest levels. Before that, you're going to pick together pieces and puzzle pieces to make this build function. Down below, you will find a max planner. On the left side, underneath the spirit boons, you have a drop-down menu where you can choose level 60, 70, 80, 90 and 100, multiple variations, because for 100, we're going to have another change, specifically for Uber Lilith. Instead of going for Hurricane with 3 points here, we are going to go with Earthen Bulwark and the Unstoppable node, 2 points here, to get an Unstoppable buff for a longer duration for the second phase of that fight. Otherwise, you're going to struggle immensely. For all other purposes, go with this build I already mentioned. Anyway, that sums up all there is to know about the Pulverize build. This is basically the most optimized version of this build and the most smoothest to play. So I hope you like it. If yes, leave a like, leave a comment. If you have any questions, leave us up so you don't miss any content, and you can join the channel membership as well as leave a donation if you have the spare coin. See you next time and bye.